CosmicCanyons.
The Fiasco by Josef Rossmann. In the year 2164, humanity took its first interstellar leap. A genetically modified chimpanzee named Isaac was sent aboard the spaceship Starjumper 1 to Proxima Centauri. However, instabilities in the propulsion system led to a failure, and Isaac vanished without a trace. That same year, a solar war broke out, which paralyzed the entire solar system and brought all ongoing projects to a halt. 30 years later, the Solar Research Agency dared to try again with an improved drive. The Starjumper 2 had successfully passed all tests in interstellar space beyond the Oort cloud. This time, a human pilot was to undertake the mission and simultaneously determine the whereabouts of Starjumper 1. Peter Harris, a veteran of space travel, was chosen. He knew Isaac well, having personally trained the genetically modified chimpanzee when he was a young scientist. Like its predecessor, the Starjumper 2 was a small ship, equipped with a warp drive powered by an antimatter core. It had enough room for a single person, including a modest cabin, a mess hall, and a comprehensive life support system. Holographic simulations via a special neural headset allowed the pilot to access training programs and leisure activities. The ship was also outfitted for extravehicular tasks, though it was not built for planetary landings. Harris sat tensely in his seat. The lines on his weathered face were sharply etched in the cold glow of the ship's instruments. His eyes, full of determination and acuity, scanned the displays before him. The countdown was in progress, while launch control, stationed beyond the Kuiper belt, made its final preparations. Control to Starjumper 2. Are all systems ready? Starjumper 2 to control. All systems are green. Ready for launch. Roger. Starjumper 2. Countdown T-minus 10 seconds. Harris closed his eyes and took a deep breath. His thoughts raced. This test flight was the result of years of preparation and countless simulations. Isaac had successfully jumped to Alpha Centauri, but then vanished without a trace. Harris knew the risk was high, yet the chance to make history was simply irresistible. Meanwhile, the countdown continued. 3, 2, 1, launch. The familiar vista of space transformed into a breathtaking kaleidoscope of light and color. The stars, which once shone as fixed points in the heavens, melted into shimmering bands of light that wound around the Starjumper 2. It was as if the ship were traveling through a gigantic, living plasma. In the midst of this transcendent experience, Peter Harris felt the weight of the universe, the immense force that made such journeys possible. It was as though he were gliding through the very heart of creation, through an endless tunnel of light and darkness, where being and nothingness reached out to one another. Then, abruptly and without warning, it was over. The lights and colors dissolved, the distortion vanished, and the stars reappeared. Before him, Proxima Centauri loomed, radiant and close. The journey, which had lasted only mere moments, left Harris with a deep sense of fear and humility. He had experienced the impossible, a trip through curved space-time that had whisked him from star to star in seconds. The red dwarf emitted an ominous glow. Harris had been instructed to contact Earth via quantum communication after a successful jump. Starjumper 2 to control. Arrival at Proxima Centauri successful. Checking systems and initiating return trajectory calculation. Harris waited, but no response came. He remained calm and thought of Isaac. Was the chimpanzee still trapped somewhere in the system? In the sarcophagus that was Starjumper 1? Finally, the ground station answered. Starjumper 2. This is control. Message received. Prepare the return jump for any emergencies and proceed with your mission. Understood. Control. Out. Harris acknowledged the transmission and began charging the chemical propulsion system to maneuver within the solar system. The recalculation of his home course was complex and took several hours. In the meantime, he would continue orbiting the Proxima Centauri system. Proxima Centauri b revealed itself as a dead world, a radioactive ocean alternating with a dry, red-lit desert. In his thoughts, Harris reviewed the mission objectives: to investigate the whereabouts of Starjumper 1. The computation for the return jump was purely an emergency procedure designed for a rapid return and took hours. Proxima b proved to be an uninhabitable hell. Toxic gases and an incompatible surface pressure rendered the existence of life practically impossible. Harris felt a pang of melancholy. He was the first to explore Proxima b, and his great and deeply disappointing realization was that the Sun's nearest star did not harbor a livable world. The other celestial bodies orbiting Proxima Centauri included 2 enormous gas giants, several moons, and a small icy world in dangerously close proximity. As he composed his report, problems suddenly arose. The computer repeatedly aborted the return jump calculation. Faulty data blocks, it seemed. Harris switched to one of the redundant backup systems and restarted the computation, but the second computer also reported errors. Reluctantly, he activated the next backup system and sent out another quantum communication signal while continuing to orbit Proxima b. A nagging sensation of being watched would not leave him. Again and again, his thoughts turned to Isaac and Starjumper 1. What had happened? Harris brought the Starjumper 2 into a lower orbit around Proxima b to get a closer look at the surface details. But then, suddenly, his head began to ache, his eyes burned, his vision blurred, and in an instant, he found himself standing on the ground of a strange planet under a reddish sky. All around him, it appeared that all his friends and relatives were present. The smell of grilled meat hung in the air, mixed with the familiar scent of freshly cut grass. Harris recognized the garden of his childhood home, where his family had often celebrated together. He could hear the laughter of his children playing nearby. The familiar faces of his family, his wife, his parents, were all there, as if they had never been gone. "This can't be true," Harris whispered. He tried to close his eyes, but he couldn't. Eventually, he accepted the situation and reached for a bottle of beer sitting on a table. It felt astonishingly real. He took a sip, feeling the cool liquid slide down his throat. "Are you excited?" a voice asked from behind him. It was his brother, the very brother who had died years ago. "Excited? About what?" "We have finally made contact with extraterrestrials. They call their world Earth and their star Sol." Harris choked on his beer. "We're on Earth, and up there is Sol?" he said, pointing at a star glowing in red light. Slowly, he began to understand that this was meant to resemble a barbecue party in the setting of an alien world, Proxima b. "You recognize it, stranger," his brother said in a strangely altered voice. "This is meant to show you what befell our world when you sent your technology to us." Suddenly, the peaceful scene around him began to disintegrate. The sky darkened, and a dreadful tremor shook the ground. Trees and bushes burst into flames, and the screams of his family echoed in his ears. Harris wanted to move, to help, but he was paralyzed. He watched as the sky was torn apart by the remnants of a warp drive's curvature burst as a bloom of streaming light spread across the heavens. Harris felt as though he were burning. The world around him shattered, and he was pulled into darkness. He regained consciousness back in his seat aboard the Starjumper 2. A loud, piercing alarm blared through the cabin. The proximity alert had been activated. His eyes darted over the displays in a panic as he tried to orient himself. A massive object appeared before his spacecraft, a gigantic, deep red cylinder advancing ominously. His radio crackled, and the distorted, mocking laughter of the voice that had once been his brother returned. Yet the instruments were unable to capture it properly. The displays flickered with contradictory data. Unsure of what to do, Harris followed protocol and attempted to contact the home base. Starjumper 2 to control. This is Harris. I have an unidentified object ahead of me. Requesting instructions. Silence. No signal, no response. He tried again, but the quantum link remained dead. He was on his own. The eerie object continued its approach, and it was clearly the work of intelligent design. Gripping the controls, he attempted to change course, but the propulsion system reported malfunctions. Suddenly, a blinding light flooded the cabin. Harris screamed as a searing pain shot through him. His eyes burned, and he could barely see. The light intensified until it became unbearable. He felt as if he were standing in flames. The agony was overwhelming, and he could not escape it. Drenched in sweat, he awoke. The cabin's light had dimmed, and the instruments had stabilized. Although the proximity alert was now deactivated, the unsettling feeling lingered. Breathing heavily and struggling to gather his thoughts, he knew that what he had witnessed was not normal. The vision of his family transforming into a nightmare, the appearance of that eerie object. Now, he felt more vulnerable and insignificant than ever. Yet he forced himself to look at the displays once more. The data remained murky, but it appeared that the object had moved away. The propulsion system was severely damaged, and the energy supply was unstable. Time and again, his thoughts returned to Isaac and Starjumper 1. Had they suffered the same fate? Did it have something to do with that dark red object, or with this ominous vision? With trembling hands, he began to carry out the necessary repairs aboard his ship, though every movement brought pain. As he worked, the words of his brother echoed in his mind. We have finally made contact with extraterrestrials. Was this vision some form of communication? Were beings from the Proxima system truly trying to show him something? With every repair he made, his resolve grew stronger. He knew he was there, not only for himself or for the solar authorities, but on behalf of all humanity. Sitting back down, he performed one final system check. The drive was provisionally repaired and the energy supply stable enough for the moment. Looking at the monitors, he attempted communication once again. Starjumper 2 to control, requesting communication confirmation. His voice was calm and determined despite the inner turmoil. Yet again, there was no response. Control was silent. Had they even received his message? Then Harris was enveloped once more by a dazzling light. The cockpit blurred before his eyes, and he found himself in an alien landscape. All around him stretched a bizarre, pulsating world under a violet sky. Everywhere he looked, shapes of beings constantly shifted and reformed. He realized that none of it was real. Nothing here was tangible. "Who are you?" he cried, looking around in bewilderment. A figure stepped forward and spoke in a strange tongue that he somehow understood. "Now you have entered our realm, human. Your intrusion has violated our boundaries." I was conducting a test flight. I did not enter your world. I'm not the first here, only the first of my kind. The one who came before me was different, and I must determine his fate. Our technology has touched things. The one before you was responsible for the destruction of our world. We, whom you now see on this plane, are all that remain. The surroundings shifted once again. Harris saw Proxima B as it once was, teeming with its original flora and fauna. It became clear that he was witnessing the past of that world. You must send me back. I need to return to my ship. I do not belong here." "Return?" The figure laughed bitterly. "You do not understand what you have wrought here. 20 years ago, your ship came too close to our world. The anomaly with which you traveled through space unleashed a shockwave that completely obliterated our atmosphere. It was a catastrophe. Our world was nearly annihilated. Harris felt small and full of guilt. I knew nothing of the unimaginable disaster we caused. It was never our intention to harm you. We didn't even know you existed. The stranger replied, "We have received your signals, your data, what you call television broadcasts. We are aware of your aggression and your greed. You humans are a threat to all life. Ever since the catastrophe, we have lived in constant fear of you." The figure looked down upon him. "But you are different. You resemble the one who came before you. What you call your ship is akin to that which he used." With a wistful gaze, the being continued, "Fortunately for you, we who remain here are the pacifists. The aggressive side of our species is on its way to you. Your technology might indeed be able to stop them. We require 20 years for a flight between our two stars. The fleet departed less than 20 years ago. You could be home in time to warn your kind, and we will grant you that chance." Harris stood there, mouth agape. He found it difficult to speak, but finally he began, I have so many questions for you, so many apologies, but I understand. You want to send me back. Send me back." The figure moved closer. "We hope that you are capable of saving your world." A brilliant light enveloped Harris. For a moment he felt weightless, and suddenly he was back in the cockpit of the Starjumper 2. The instruments flashed erratically, but he knew what had to be done. His hands flew over the controls as he opened a communication channel. "Starjumper 2 to control. I'm on the return leg. All navigation computers have failed. I will perform a warp jump using redundant data." The computer continued to report malfunctions, but Harris ignored them. It was a race against time. He had to warn Earth of the approaching fleet. A jump based on rudimentary data was a gamble, yet it also offered a chance. In an emergency, the course calculations could be bypassed, though the journey was by no means safe. He set the Starjumper 2 accordingly and commanded, "Computer, initiate return jump." The ship vibrated as the drive charged. Suddenly, a blinding light filled the cabin, and he felt the Starjumper 2 being pulled into the curvature of space. The stars blurred into streaks as space and time drifted past. How long would this warp flight last this time? Would he vanish into nothingness, relying on such rudimentary data? Then the moment came. The Starjumper 2 emerged from the warp. Harris looked out the window, searching. His onboard computer displayed one error message after another. A strange feeling welled up inside him as he tried to assess the situation. With growing dread, he glanced at his displays, which now showed a solar system he could hardly recognize. What he saw made the blood in his veins run cold. The entire system was devastated. Planets that were once teeming with life were dead. Nothing remained. Everything was destroyed. His eyes scanned the monitors, which depicted an endless mass of wreckage and decay. The remnants of enormous space stations, ships, and satellites drifted through the void like ghostly ruins. Harris's heart sank. Had the war he had hoped to prevent already occurred? It couldn't be. He must have arrived here earlier than the strangers. He tried once more. "Control, this is Starjumper 2. Please acknowledge I'm here." Somehow, he knew his words were echoing into the void. The communications devices showed no connection. He was utterly alone. The silence in the spacecraft enveloped him like a shroud. The only sounds were the hum of the machinery and his own breathing. Using the long-range sensors, he scanned the planets of the solar system that had once been so vibrant. Earth, the blue jewel of the solar system, was nothing more than a dead, barren rock. The oceans had evaporated, the continents burned. There was no sign of life, no movement, only an endless, desolate landscape of ruin. Harris set a course for Mars, once humanity's hope for a second home. It too was a tomb. Every dome city was destroyed, the terraforming facilities shattered. The red desert stretched out undisturbed. He could not believe it. He then set course for Venus. As he approached, he saw that the planet's colonies, once radiant cities among the clouds, were now nothing but lifeless scrap drifting in space. In a final act of desperation, he began steering toward Jupiter's moon Europa, which had once been a shining center of scientific research, but was now nothing more than a jagged mass of ice, shattered and pockmarked by countless impacts. Harris checked his instruments and pointed his telescope at Proxima Centauri, seeking some kind of solace. To his horror, he realized that the red star was no longer there. What had happened? A beeping sound tore him from his thoughts. The onboard computer reported a time reading based on an old beacon placed on the moon. According to solar timekeeping, 150 years had passed, while he had been traveling for only a few moments. He sank deeper into his seat and buried his hands in his hair. The futility of it all overwhelmed him. There was no hope, no comfort. The conflict he had hoped to prevent had long been lost for both sides. No, that can't be, he whispered. Harris let the truth sink in. His sacrifice, his mission, his world that he had longed to save, the very conflict he had tried to avert. His voice was scarcely more than a whisper in the cold air of the cabin. I'm sorry. Darkness closed in around him, and he shut his eyes. He allowed the emptiness to seep into him, feeling hope finally abandon him. In the infinite silence of the universe, he waited for the end. A lost traveler, adrift in a sea of despair. He knew that his story might never be told, yet he clung to it and transmitted it into the void. Now he was the last survivor of a fallen world, without a future, trapped in the eternal, cold embrace of space. If you enjoyed this journey into the unknown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow for more thrilling sci-fi stories. Your support helps keep these tales alive. Until next time, stay curious. See you in the Cosmic Canyons.